Now I have the opportunity to service the world's most desperate needs. How could there not be anything more motivating than potentially bringing cures and treatments to diseases, improving agriculture, and changing the productivity of crops and the nutrient content of crops? I am so lucky to be in the position that we can have a path to bring these natural molecules into research for the first time.
Welcome to Mastering the Numbers. I'm your host, Joe Mallo. Welcome back to another episode of Mastering the Numbers. Very fortunate to have our guest on here today, Ross Young, CEO and founder of Biosortia. Ross, thanks for taking time out of what I know is an extremely busy schedule to spend it with me.
Joe, I appreciate it, and I'm glad to be here and hope that this can be something that people will share and like because we're going to give them some really good new information they probably have not heard.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear from you. So why don't we get started with this? Tell the audience a little bit about Biosortia.
Biosortia has access to the most drug-like molecules in nature that science has never been able to obtain. So let me put that in perspective because that's a pretty impactful sentence. All of the drugs on the shelf, 50% of them came from 1% of the source I just talked about. With access to only 1%, science has been able to find 50% of the drugs. Biosortia, with a breakthrough technology funded by ARPA-E, DARPA, US Air Force, NIH, Los Alamos National Lab, State of Ohio, has broken the barrier, and we now have effectively access to the full 100% of nature's secrets that have never been able to be in the hands of researchers.
And how long has Biosortia been around?
Well, we started this project, this opportunity, as far back as 2008 inside of another company called Univenture. Univenture was a plastics company, still is a plastics manufacturer that makes consumer products and packaging. But essentially, we started to look at bioplastics. And then after we pivoted on bioplastics, we realized our technologies we developed to advance bioplastics opened the door to, quite frankly, all of these drug-like molecules research has never had access to. And Biosortia got its firm start in 2012 and then ultimately had to advance and develop and research those technologies. Then we had to prove those technologies. So by 2018, 2019, we were able to do exactly what we had, let's say, thought we could do. We had proved it, we had peer review, we had partner collaborations and proof of concepts, and we were ready to go full scale. Then the pandemic hit.
Of
And that
course.
derailed new technology. Luckily, we did what all emerging technologies should do. Don't get impatient, stay focused, find a way to survive. And I think we're entering a new world where the world is recognizing they have not had access to the best molecules for drugs. That's why drug pipelines are waning. The cost of a new drug development is massive. And the reality of it is they're really recycling molecules they've found. We're now in a position to bring them the finite set of small molecules nature's made versus the infinite set of possibilities. We love the fact that nature in 4.2 billion years has refined what works in biology. We're focused on that, where the whole world is focused on not that.
So, would there be a correlation between the better that your organization does in developing these molecules and pharmaceutical prices going down?
Well, let's say, is there the possibility that new cures, new treatments, new agrochemical products, new cosmetic products could come from our platform? And the answer is categorically yes. Now, if there is multiple products within a competing area, let's call it weight loss. Right now,
Yeah.
most pharma companies are looking to create a treatment that's ongoing. So there's a cost associated with continuing to treat a potential patient, even if it's for something like weight loss. The reality of it is if there's more competition in the space because more molecules are being found, there is the possibility prices could and should go down. It's a delicate balance in the pharmaceutical world because typically it costs a lot to develop one drug as well. In our case, we're going to be a discovery platform, an engine of giving all of the biotechs of the world, the pharmas of the world, the academic researchers of the world access to nature's secrets. And our goal is to create IP with them. They get to benefit from the IP, we get to benefit from the IP, and ultimately a bevy of new products and competing products will come out of this. So, yes, it should ultimately slow the increase. And in some cases, there is the potential of reversing the cost. And one of the reasons it could potentially reverse the cost is so many things are being pursued that are extremely costly because that's how pharma companies stay in business, and it costs a lot to develop those. If you have access to these molecules, it should cost less to develop, and it should cost less to make, and it should cost less to deploy within a system of healthcare. So that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons cost could go down.
Yeah, that makes complete economic sense. So, let me take you back to the beginning when you first started Biosortia. What prompted you to start your own business?
I think when we go back to my first business I started, it was in 1988, and it was a company called Univenture. And in that case, I had worked for a couple of high-tech industries, the medical imaging business, the video and optical disc business. And I had basically 10 years in the video and optical disc business. And it was a challenging business. It was a new technology, but it was a challenging business. And in those companies, I was lucky enough to be in engineering and lucky enough to use creative skills to design, create, and invent things. And after those companies had their challenges, I had the brilliant idea, which I wouldn't recommend for everyone, and it was a hard road for me. I know I might as well invent something for myself and see if I could start a company. See, I was young enough and dumb enough at the time that you just go for it. Miraculously, it worked. So I guess I wasn't
Yeah.
just engineer. I think I was part entrepreneur. I did test out as an ENTJ, which is a Myers-Briggs, which basically says you have that entrepreneurial spirit to a certain degree. And I hit the Inc. 500 because apparently I designed a product that fit with what consumers needed at the time. And not only hit it once, but I hit it 5 times in a row. So we were off to the races on a bootstrapped engineering run company that just happened to hit on some successful opportunities early.
That's great. So, what have been some of the biggest struggles you've had to overcome? And that could be for Biosortia, or it could be for previous organizations you started as well.
I think it's been a inability to adequately explain what we're trying to do to funding sources and execute so we can drive the kind of revenue where funding sources will beat a path to your door. Because if you need money and you're trying to raise money, you better hope daddy or mommy have money because the reality of the world, you're not getting any unless you don't really need it. And
Right.
that's
I hear
even
that.
true. It's even true in the VC world. So you have to prove a dynamic that creates a level of interest that's outstanding. And I think with Biosortia, even though we've run for years, once we got through that development, once we got through the technology breakthrough, my mistake was not recognizing the best way to communicate to those funding sources how we're going to drive revenue. I thought I did, but now I think we have switched the dynamic and we're going to partners and we're bringing partners in left and right that can ultimately we can bring molecules to now, even though it may be computationally now, it is from the sources we described, which is nature. And we've been able to find molecules parties will be interested in. And that includes things like regenerative, longevity. It includes things like neuro, metabolic. So we're really starting to land our first deals. And then I think the funding sources will beat their pathway to our door going, wow, this is a phenomenal technology.
Yeah.
Having a phenomenal technology alone without those customers actively engaged virtually means nothing. And that's what I've learned.
And you probably have to be able to develop something that's explainable. Even, even though the people inside VC are incredibly smart individuals, it needs to be easily explainable, I would imagine.
It does, but that's not enough.
Right.
There are some things that make it enough. I mean, if we go back and we look at why Theranos got funded, I will say it was because of the people that was around the leadership. And there were some very powerful, influential people that anybody could look at and say, well, if they trust it, I trust it. And they were able to raise $1 billion on virtually nothing but smoke and mirrors. And anybody in the scientific world would have said, hey, there's nothing but smoke and mirrors here. And the reality, it didn't matter. So, what does
Right.
that tell you about the mindset of VCs and investors? They want to follow the winners. When you do a breakthrough technology, unless you have that kind of support around you, there's nobody to follow. The only people to follow in our case will be our customers going, I want to work with them. So we had to recognize there had to be a key group someone was willing to follow. And that's why we put such a focus on doing partnering deals now. Now, it could
Makes sense.
benefit these companies greatly because an early deal is kind of like an early Bitcoin. Think about it. If a pharma company or a biotech company comes in and says, we're focused on these targets and we want to lock you down as our supplier of building our pipeline with these materials. Well, doing an early deal costs less. Doing a
Right.
later deal could cost a lot more. So it's kind of a dynamic that we hope really accelerates Biosortia rapidly by focusing on what we know we can do rather than focusing on what we can tell people we can do.
Exactly. Get rid of the smoke and mirrors.
Get rid of all the smoke and mirrors and start doing it.
Yeah. So, in the growth of Biosortia over the years, is there anything that you would do differently? Not different company wise, but just in the growth of the company?
It's been a long learning curve. I think the technology was harder than we ever thought. So we had started with original technology and had to go through generation one, two, three, four. And we're in the fourth generation now, and it's spectacular. Could have we started at generation one in finding molecules? We could have. There would have been challenges and there would have been um, incompleteness. And I think maybe we were focused a little too much on perfection. As an engineer and as someone wanting to develop a technology, I wanted to do something that gave us a complete picture of a living, breathing microbiome habitat. And if we had 70% of that, we were missing so much. I think we could have started at 70% if we realized what we had at that point and
Yeah.
focused on that platform. But we also would have had to recognize land customers now. Quit trying to raise money. And since we had money from early investors, and I'm talking about angels, we could have done that then. Hindsight, wow, I wish we would have done that then. Then we could have co-developed not only the technologies to improve them and continually improve them, but we certainly could have expanded our pipeline and our ability to interact. We'll never know because now we're at a stage where nobody is looking at this technology. Nobody is trying to compete with this technology in the world. It's on a scale that's unheard of. Therefore, since we're really ready to go now, we may be able to hold and control a first mover advantage because we'll accelerate so fast once we really move to
Yeah.
that next step.
Yeah, I think there's some good nuggets of advice in there for people that are thinking about starting businesses for sure. Um, so let's go in another direction here. I mean, you and I, we've talked a few times. We've had trouble getting on the podcast together because we're both busy. How do you balance your professional and personal life with what I know is an extremely busy schedule?
I think balance is hard. So one has to decide what are you willing to sacrifice? Um, because I'll be honest, the people that think they can have a complete life balance in the midst of a hurricane aren't being realistic. I've seen that. I've seen that before with uh, leadership of companies where if it's an established going organization, sure, you can put somebody in there that has the skills, has the team, has the resources, has the earnings, and it's much easier. But when you're talking about a startup environment, when you're talking about something that is built on chaos and decisions are trying to be made on chaos, you better be willing to sacrifice almost everything to make it happen. And you have got to be dedicated to a mission. Now, does that mean you forget about your family? No. You try your best, but you've got to also hope that everyone around you understands and helps you try to find as much balance as possible. It's not easy. And I think those that seek balance and try to do something hard and demanding better rethink what they're planning to do. And I think you can go back through history at all major, let's say, startups of companies, organizations, projects. Go to the Manhattan Project. Do you think people that really were in the leadership position of the Manhattan Project had a work-life balance?
No,
No,
not at
no.
all.
Not at all. And it doesn't happen for entrepreneurs that want to win
Yeah.
and want to succeed. If it does, brilliant for them. They're special or what they pick to do is special. It's not always easy.
Yeah. I always tell people balance doesn't mean it's 50-50. Maybe the right balance for somebody is 20-80, right? You just have to find out what you have to maintain like family. And then, like you said, the rest of it can sometimes go away. But
And
it's different for
with
everybody.
90, you are exactly right. With 95% of the companies failing within the first few years of a startup, that doesn't mean those 95% weren't trying, weren't
Yeah.
working their tail off, weren't sacrificing and giving up. It's only part of the equation. It's not everything by any means. But, and I'm sure out of those 5%ers that did succeed, there were people that were able to do work-life balances. But again, what kind of company was started? how much resources did they ever have before they started that company? Were they doing something that has been done before, or were they breaking the mold on something? I think when you break the mold, it's a whole different dynamic. I guarantee you the startup of Microsoft, there was not work-life balances. And the reason there wasn't, you can look at Google, you can look at Facebook or Meta. The reality of it is they had to build a work-life balance into their working environment. They gave them free food, they gave them free drinks, they had workout facilities, they had playthings there. They were attracting people that wanted to work and have a life balance around their work because they knew they needed people that were committed to the mission.
Yeah, I think I agree. Somebody told me once, they said, work-life balance, don't call it work-life balance, call it work-life integration. You have to find some way to mold them together, but you're probably not going to find complete balance to be successful. So I agree. Well, so with that being said, do you have a support team, either at work, at home, both, that keeps you on track and keeps you laser focused?
I do. I think I do. I think my relationships at home are fantastic. My relationships with my children, um, you know, they've been successful. So I guess even though I've been an entrepreneur and they've had the unfortunate reality of being around an entrepreneur, I'm not sure I ever missed one of their athletic games. If I did, it wasn't um, a choice on my part. It was probably I had no choice because
Yeah,
I wanted to be there and I was there. Both of my kids, believe it or not, I drove to school as often as I could because I wanted that extra time with them. So I fought for that time, knowing that if they were in bed by 8 o'clock, I was still working from 8 to 1 o'clock a
yeah,
lot of times. So
yeah,
I think the support system has always been solid. There's a lot of love and caring there. And at work, believe it or not, we have the kind of culture where I would even describe it as I love these people.
yeah,
I mean, we try to find the work-life balance around work, and I'd say many of the people that are employed here have a great work-life balance. But I also know they're dedicated, they're determined to win, and I've got people around me that have been with me 30 years,
yeah.
20 years. It's really wonderful to work with such great people that understand what we're trying to do and are committed to it.
Yeah. Saying that you made it to your kids' athletic events, that's the integration that I'm talking about. I spent a few years where I was missing almost all of my son's lacrosse games, and I needed to find some integration of my own. And even if it was just as simple as making sure I was showing up to his events, so there's a little integration in there. So
And I don't know why your story there brought this up, but my older daughter had to put up with me going to her games, which, the competitive spirit of an entrepreneur, you're sitting on the bench and you're watching the kids play, and you can't help but to jump up and yell something. But I finally got the messaging from her. Keep your mouth shut, Dad.
yeah, yeah. I've seen parents like you at games.
Well, I don't think I was as bad as some, but she might
Yeah,
disagree.
she might. She might. So how do you continue to maintain your motivation and focus to grow the organization?
Oh, it's the overall mission. It's the overall vision. If you don't have a good, solid vision and mission, I mean, when I was in the plastics industry, I loved what I was doing. I loved being able to serve customers. I loved customers being happy. So I think the motivation was all around service. Now I have the opportunity to service the world's most desperate needs. How could there not be anything more motivating than potentially bringing cures and treatments to diseases, improving agriculture, and changing the productivity of crops and the nutrient content of crops? I, I am so lucky. to be in the position that we can have a path to bring these natural molecules into research for the first time. If I had the opportunity to put every penny in my bank account into this, I would do it. In fact, in some ways I have. I have put the ultimate bet down. I want to see this succeed because this is too important to this planet and to the people on this planet and their future. We need access. And if it's not me, it's going to happen. But when? Will it be another 20 years? Does it matter if it's another 20 years? Well, I'm in the position that we found out what we found out. We've proven what we've proven. We are ready to go. And my only big complaint about myself is I did not realize earlier what it was going to take to attract the kind of people to support us. And we're on that topic now.
Yeah. So has it been difficult finding the right? I think that's what you're alluding to. It's been difficult finding the right people to help grow your mission.
Oh, it's been very, very difficult. I think one of the challenges is pre-pandemic, the technology was developed. The execution of the technology took resources. So it's kind of like you can plan and buy the property for a shopping mall, but if you've bought the property and you've now planned it, guess what? You still have to have the resources to build the shopping mall.
Right.
And that's where we were at. So we were ready to execute and we were ready to execute at scale. Well, what has developed is we've been able to dig into the data so substantially in what is called two dimensions. Think of everything in this world with a complete picture is three-dimensional. So if you're looking at something two-dimensional, it doesn't give you the depth of knowledge. So we were looking at our chemistry two-dimensionally. Now, because of the advancements of AI, the advancements of researchers around the world understanding chemistry, we can computationally expand this, meaning we can now do the analysis where we couldn't before. So instead of going and executing at full scale, that has moved down the timeline because now I can computationally execute. And then as I prove it out computationally, then my next goal will be to execute at full scale, meaning I have access to these molecules and can actually do the kind of studies on them to tell you what they actually look like and what they actually can do. And that's going to be critical, but I'm not held to that next step leap because of the advancements in machine learning, AI, and our very unique data sets. And just to put our data sets in perspective, in all the world, you can go to the Natural Products Atlas. There's 36,500 molecules listed on that. There's about 10,000 drugs that came from microbial molecules directly, indirectly, or inspirationally. In one execution of our technology, we're able to put 73,000 plus new molecules on the list. We will be able to put 1 million of nature's molecules on that list, absolutely expanding that list a couple orders of magnitude. We're excited about that prospect and we can't wait to really execute, but we know we can do it computationally now, and we've started with that.
Yeah. I'd say the more I talk to you, the more interested I am in seeing where this goes. I can't wait to see how far it goes and what you help develop for sure. Where do you see the business in the next 12 to 36 months?
Well, I think we're going to see some of the funding we need to execute computationally. Likely within 6 months of that, we'll see the funding to execute at full scale. So within this next 9 months, we may be knocking the doors off this company. What I would say after that, it's a race because people will recognize pretty quickly what we have and they'll be going, why don't we have that? So with nobody in academia, nobody in industry ever taking our approach, we think we have a lead. So at the point where that kind of excitement around this technology starts to develop, because you read about it in Time or on the Wall Street Journal or something like that, I think that will be the time for us to more than quadruple down and really make sure that we're putting the organization, the team, the execution pathway, the partnerships, the collaborations. It will all line up with the revenue we're starting to generate. I think we'll accelerate dramatically. So that's the vision. We all know that
Yeah.
sometimes realities don't work out that way. Things interrupt all the time. Many people had a belief of what was going to happen, and then out of the blue came a pandemic. You never
Yes.
know. You got to be prepared to survive somehow.
You always have to. You always have to. So, what's the best business advice anybody's ever given you over the years?
Well, um, one of them came from a professor at OSU that was retired, who became an advisor of mine. And it was early with Univenture and me trying to determine my product pricing. I had a unique product, I had a unique market. I've always focused on doing something others weren't doing. I look at that as find a way to excel better, faster, cheaper, differentiated. You've got to have at least one of those to really find a way to win. If all you are doing is being competitive with everybody else, there's no differentiation. But he said to me early in Univenture, as we were sitting on our auctioned equipment that I found, for $10 and a desk for $15, he said, you can always drop your pricing. Don't start with your lowest price.
Yeah.
So I went out there and I priced my product at what I thought was a stupid price. But he said, you can always drop your price. And at $39 in 1988, I was getting buyers from all over the world.
Yeah.
And I thought the product should have been priced at around 15
Yeah.
because that's what seemed like it made sense to me. And I was so glad I priced it higher and made the product, let's say, at the higher end of the market and differentiated. The differentiation allowed that price. Ultimately, competition came in. But the reality of it is, he was right. I could always lower my price. So start somewhere that is more appropriate for what you're trying to do. And that really helped me through the first 5 years and hitting Inc. 500 5 years in a row.
Yeah. I think that leads to a point I try to make often, which is it's so important for all of us in business to make sure that we have mentors and people that we can go to ask questions. People that have been there before and done it before. So